this discomfort within Canada predates Confederation. I mean, the Alberta and Saskatchewan were supposed to join together as a province called Buffalo, but they were split in half in part to keep them weaker.
So, we're really excited about this project. We're moving it forward, and we're not going to let the establishment forces that literally treat Alberta citizens like subjects and peons, which they have done for decades, if not since 1905, stand in the way of independent Albertans standing up and saying, we've had enough. We want out. We want a new constitution that gets us out of the Westminster system of governance, where we elect effectively a dictator, an elected dictator for 5 years at a time with no checks and balances. I mean, people want a real substantive change to the way that we're governed and the relationship between citizens and the government.
I'm just trying to smoke out different questions because I've been thinking about some of these issues for my whole life. And I've also observed Quebec, for example, and how it tried to deal with these things. I mentioned to Derek Philibran of the Western Standard that when I was in Ottawa, I became friends, when I was a young man, I worked for Preston Manning out in Ottawa. I became friends with my counterpart who worked for the Bloc Québécois. And it was sort of an interesting friendship, people from different parts of the country and different parts of the ideological spectrum. And one thing I learned was that the Parti Québécois, that is the provincial separatist party, when it formed the government, so when it had the access to the resources of the state, it put together a multi-volume sort of encyclopedia on how to separate. And they got the smartest people in Quebec to write different essays. What will we do about our currency? What will we do with our military bases? What will we do with our debt? What will we, because as soon as you say separate, then people start to think about things they're worried about. And this project, and I actually got a set of this sort of, I forget what it was called. It was in French. It was big volumes of thoughtful, scholarly answers to genuine questions. Everything I just said there, it's a real question. And what happens to our passports? What happens to our, there's a lot, and some of them have really easy answers. Some, there's different kinds of answers. And I think what that did is that was an attempt by the Parti Québécois to show that they had an answer for those things. And it was a kind of planning document too, in case they ever did get the referendum successful. And they had a network of academics and people in the cultural community. I mean, so much of the Quebec cultural community, artists, songwriters, poets, novelists, so much of the artistic community, because it was so romantic, the idea of Quebec independence, were on side. So it wasn't just politicians. It was lawyers, it was economists, it was professors, it was artists. And it was a movement.
But I don't think what you seem to be giving credit to, Ezra, is that a lot of that work is being done by APP and has already been done by APP. We're certainly aware of a lot of the work that's been done in Quebec, and a lot of us have read it. So, I mean, a lot of the questions are fairly simple. They're a fairly simple answer. I mean, one of the biggest questions we get is, oh my goodness, what's going to, and this is for a serious issue for people on fixed incomes and people that are looking at retirement. And we have a big segment of our baby boom population that's heading that way. Oh my goodness, what about our Canada pension plan? And the simple answer is there's going to be a constitutionalized guarantee of people's pensions in, the independent Commonwealth of Alberta, guaranteed by the full resource wealth of the province of Alberta, that, those pensions will be payable in US dollars or whatever the new currency of Alberta will be, the Alberta dollar, guaranteed until Alberta negotiates the repatriation of the 300 and some odd billion dollars of Alberta money that's parked in the Canada pension plan. But the great thing about Alberta and Alberta's wealth is we can afford to self-fund those pensions very easily. I mean, we're only looking right now, we send $9 billion a year to CPP, we get $3 billion back. So we're looking at $3 billion in pensions that have to be covered off by the Commonwealth of Alberta the day that we declare independence. I mean, that's not a problem, and that's only if Canada decides to try to play some stupid little hardball game and say, oh, if you're going to be independent, we're going to cut off your pensions. Or alternatively, in the likelihood that the Canadian dollar starts trading on par with the Polish zloty after Alberta and all of its oil revenue and resources leave Canada, again, the Alberta government would guarantee the pensions of Alberta pensioners, at the same rate on, pegged to the U.S. dollar. I mean, we're discussing all of those things. I mean, that's why we have, CEOs from financial institutions that are part of our movement and part of our group. I mean, we have experts that are involved, subject matter experts in these areas that are working with us. So, all of this is serious as a heart attack, and we're serious about moving it all forward.
I think that a fear-based campaign that would unlock genuine concerns of people would be devastating.
I don't think so. I mean, they're already trying it already.
Ask, how do you allay concerns and fears? I think there's a huge fear of change, and things are bad in Alberta, but things could always get worse.
They're going to continue to get worse, whether Poilievre's elected or whether Carney, and especially if Carney's elected. So from our perspective, a lot of that fear, first of all, is completely misplaced. So, what would happen if BC cut off our pipelines? Well, BC needs to have, all of its goods moved by rail through Alberta to Ontario. So nobody's going to be cutting off their nose to spite their face. And once Alberta leaves Canada, there's going to have to be a responsible discussion between responsible adults to make sure that everything continues to work for everybody's mutual benefit. On the basis of our preliminary discussions with the U.S., we have no concerns whatsoever with regard to the United States recognizing Alberta independence in the same way that they intend to recognize the independence and self-determination of Greenland. So, we don't see any of these things as being an insurmountable obstacle, other than, unfortunately, in a post-COVID world, after Trudeau sicked the Canadian Army Psychological Warfare Division on Canadian people, people have been very, trained to respond to fear-based arguments.
Did you wind up going down to Washington?
We think that the benefits far outweigh, and the case we can make for all the benefits far outweigh all of the fear that they're going to be pouring all over us. That's the only argument they have. Oh, worry about this, worry about that. We're going to do this.
Well, it's human nature to
it
worry.
It goes both ways.
Have you? I know a little while ago I saw news that you were going to lead a delegation to Washington. Did that proceed? And if so, who did you meet with?
Well, we're moving forward. We're in the process of confirming meetings and so on. I'm going to be heading down to DC in a couple of weeks to do some advance work for that. The feedback that we're getting from the members of the administration that we're in contact with is overwhelmingly positive. And we're moving forward with that project. So we'll be going down. Our delegation will be going down probably in 4 to 5 weeks. And what we hope to do is, have some meetings with the U.S. administration, confirm some of the things that President Trump has teased out with regard to, various forms of Canadian independence, including, the conversion of Alberta assets and savings and so on at par with the U.S. dollar, those types of things. Find out what level of support would be forthcoming from the President Trump administration. All of those things are going to make independence that much easier. And I think, we are at a tipping point in history. I mean, we have I'm well aware, as both as a political scientist and a lawyer, that, there's 100 and some odd years of history where the U.S. has not, overtly interfered in the internal affairs of Canada. But that having been said, we think that there's a new administration, there's a new day, and we think to the extent that President Trump is willing to support self-determination for Greenland, he should be even more willing to support self-determination for Alberta because of the benefits that it would bring to the United States from a national security perspective, and completely eliminating the ability of Ottawa and buffoonish premiers like Doug Ford threatening U.S. security of energy supply, threatening export tariffs, and cutting off U.S. oil and exports from Alberta, and all of the stupidity that we've heard in the context of this phony tariff war that Trudeau started for the electoral benefit of Mark Carney.
Well, Jeffrey, it's very interesting to talk about these things, and history. I don't know if it repeats itself, but it certainly rhymes, as they say, and. This discomfort within Canada predates Confederation. I mean, the Alberta and Saskatchewan were supposed to join together as a province called Buffalo, but they were split in half in part to keep them weaker. And when they joined unequal. They didn't have the same resource rights as the other provinces. And during the Depression, Alberta was allowed to go bankrupt by the country, and I think a lot of the complaints from William Aberhart were legitimate, even if his solutions weren't. And then Ernest Manning, and then his son Preston Manning. These things have been an Alberta issue for more than 120 years. And it'll be interesting to see if Mark Carney wins, and I still hold out hope that he won't. Will he inflame things such that Alberta, as Preston Manning says, secedes? It's great to talk with you. Thank you for answering my questions, which I'm trying to probe the state of things. I want to corroborate some of the things you said in terms of the threshold for a petition, because if it is true that just 300,000 names is what's needed to have a referendum, that is a very low number when considered with the size of the voting, the list of potential voters.
And something else you have to keep in mind, Ezra, is that the people that I'm working with, whether we succeed this year or not, we're determined to have either have a petition drive every year, to have a referendum vote every year until we leave Canada, or alternatively change to put enough pressure on the Alberta government to bring in what I think is necessary, which is an Alberta Independence Referendum Act that would require a referendum on independence every time there's a federal election. So every time Toronto and Montreal elects the next boss of us, Albertans can decide whether or not we want to stay in a country under the leadership of whoever it is that that Ontario and Quebec elect to be our colonial master. So, I mean, that's where we're at. We have a committed movement. We're moving forward, and we're looking forward, hopefully, to a successful referendum for independence this year and American recognition of our independence.
Well, I live in Toronto, and I can assure you I have had no role in choosing our national or provincial leaders. Jeffrey Rath, I introduced you as a lawyer and a troublemaker, and I think I was accurate. And I'm sure we'll keep in touch in this issue. I mean, it has been something on my mind since I was a teenager. And I actually met René Lévesque when he came to Calgary, and I asked him about Western separatism. He was very shy. He was on a book tour, and he didn't want to weigh in on the subject. But I actually
of course he is, because he wouldn't want to disrupt the laying of the golden eggs for Quebec.
Yeah,
right?
he was
I think one of the best René Lévesque anecdotes I heard was, why did you hold a referendum when you knew you couldn't win? And Lévesque's response was, I have 16 billion very good reasons.
Oh, I didn't hear that. It sounds apocryphal. Jeffrey Rath, great to talk to you. We'll keep in touch.
All right, you bet, Ezra. Thanks for having me on.
There you have it. Well, very interesting. I mean, in Toronto believes it's the center of the universe, and in some ways it is. It's the financial and business and media capital of the country, but there are other parts of this country that do not feel like they are truly at home in the country. Quebec's dissatisfaction with Confederation certainly gets a lot of airtime and national attention, but anytime Alberta feels abused or looked over, and I mentioned, for example, of course, there's not a single cabinet minister in Mark Carney's government from Alberta. Not that there's much lumber to pick from for the cabinet. We'll follow this story with interest. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. Members get instant access to all of our shows, invitations to exclusive events, and access to our premium content like live event footage and documentaries you won't see anywhere else. Only Rebel News Plus members can join the conversation by participating in the comments section of our new website. That way you can have your say too. More than anything, though, you'll be able to take pride in supporting real, honest journalism, and you'll help our talented team continue to do the work to push back on the establishment. We really can use your help. We need it, in fact. So thank you, and enjoy Rebel News Plus.